The Cardinal bats erupted against Yu Darvish and the Padres on Thursday night, but would a winning weekend really change much when it comes to the Cardinals' approach to the trade deadline? We'll talk about that coming up on B-Schaeff Daily. What's going on, everyone, and welcome in to this edition of B-Schaeff Daily. Brenden Schaeffer with you. It is Friday, July 25th, 2025. The Cardinals last night finally got things going early in a game. They still weren't the first team to score in the game. That's 7 consecutive games dating back to before the All-Star break since the Cardinals have been the first team to score in their game. Their opponent has outscored them in 7 in a row. That was true last night because the Padres put up a couple of runs on Sonny Gray in the top of the first inning. But this time the Cardinals didn't wait long to bounce back and battle back on Yu Darvish. They score in the bottom of the first and then a 6th spot with all the magic coming with 2 outs in the bottom of the second inning to build a nice lead. Sonny Gray used up a lot of that cushion, but the Cardinals end up winning it 9-7. Obviously, a big sigh of relief type of win for the Cardinals if you have any hope of catching on to a wild card berth. At least that's the way it feels. I mean, the standings would tell you you're not that far out of it. 2.5 games back of the Padres is all the Cardinals are right now. But with the trend from that road trip and the way things went, losing 5 of 6 to Arizona and the Rockies series is really what sticks with you. And you're way out of it in the NL Central. You're coming up less than a week to go before the trade deadline. Do the Cardinals decide, hey, we've got to cut bait on some of our short-term expiring assets, the ones that have value? Helsley, Maton primarily. You could talk about Steven Matz. You could extend it even a little bit beyond that and say, okay, what about a guy like Jojo Romero, who is a very effective relief pitcher, a lefty that teams will covet, but he's also got 2026 under team control. And if the Cardinals are looking to maybe take a step up in the world in 2026, Jojo Romero could be a helpful player to do that. And so do you want to let go of a guy who you have a little bit of team control over? Like, all of these decisions are ones the front office will face over the next week. But with the Cardinals only being 2.5 games out, do I expect a series sweep this weekend? No, but you're a fourth of the way there. And if they were to continue to win games against the Padres, I don't know, things could get more interesting more quickly. Let me know in the comments, though, if the Cardinals continue to win. They won last night. If they can sweep the Padres, would you change your tune from thinking, oh, they definitely have to sell Helsley and Maton for whatever they can get? Or would you say, no, we gotta stick to that? Even if things start to turn up in the standings, you have to get what you can for these expiring assets, because this isn't a year where the Cardinals are going to win the World Series. And look, they're not likely to make the playoffs, even if they do go on a bit of a run here before the All-Star break. You can let me know your take on that. I'll continue to kind of lay mine out. Like, I think the Cardinals need to be selling. But specifically, I just think it's the short-term assets. It's the bullpen guys. It's the relievers. I would sell Maton, Helsley, and I would actually consider right now to be a really good time to move JoJo. Not because I don't think he could help you down the stretch, not because I don't think he couldn't help you next year, but I think his value is going to be higher now than you're ever going to see again, because he's pitching well, so recency is on your side, and he does have that extra year of control attached. So I would be exploring it. I believe teams are interested in JoJo, and the Cardinals would have to decide if they're willing to listen. They have to listen. I mean, if you're Mo and you're getting these phone calls and you're telling them, nah, we're not really interested in moving JoJo, we're not there yet. Listen, man, take a gander at what they might be offering you and really give it some consideration. I do think there's a case to be made, and I was talking about this with some other media last night in the clubhouse after the game, that if you do sell Helsley, Maton, and even add JoJo into that, like, yeah, it's going to hurt the team. You're probably going to win fewer games, because as much as I have made the case, and I still believe this, that you could bring up guys like they've already brought Grinio, you could bring Graceffo back, you could bring up Roycroft or Ryan Fernandez, and the left-handed part of it is a little tough. Jojo Romero is kind of irreplaceable in that regard. They just wouldn't have the lefty depth without making a trade, and I would continue to say do whatever you can do to get Reed Detmers on this team. Left-hander for the Los Angeles Angels, former first-round pick in the 2020 class, I believe it was. I would be all over getting that guy in, and you can use him as a reliever this year, the rest of the season, and you could bring him into spring next year and try to get him back into a rotation spot. But that's what I would be doing. And I'm not saying he would come cheap. Honestly, you're probably trading a position player to do it. I would consider, and I'd have to look and see for Reed Detmers. One thing I don't know off the top of my head is how many years of team control he has remaining. He came up pretty quickly. He's 26 years old, but he came up pretty quickly after he was drafted. But he's still got a ways to go. He's still a free agent, not until after the 2028 season. And, his numbers aren't great. He's pitched as a reliever exclusively this year. In previous seasons as a starter, he had a good 2022, but then he tailed off in 23. He was even worse last year, and I believe was in the minors for a spell last season. This year, he's been in the big league bullpen with a 4.17 ERA, but he's got 55 strikeouts in 45 innings. He's got the rest of this year, 26, 27, 28, 3 years of team control. I would trade Lars Nootbaar for Reed Detmers. I would do that trade. Maybe that's too big of a payout, like too big of a price to pay for sort of a reclamation project pitcher. But that's the creative types of avenues I think the Cardinals should be exploring right now to get done what they need to get done. Right? You've got a lot of position players that are going to be a logjam for next year, and if you can flip one of those guys who, like in the case of Nootbaar, people who listen to me and read me know that I am a fan of Lars Nootbaar, but I'm also reasonable, and I can look at the context of the roster and say, they've got other candidates for left field. Ivan Herrera might need to be moved to left field. He doesn't have a great arm, so it doesn't make him as strong of a right fielder candidate. Maybe you plug him into left field after he continues to work with the staff and John Jay and those guys and find a way to get him to the outfield because he's not going to catch. I just don't think it's a long-term solution for him. Burleson is looking like one of your mainstay batters. If you hold on to him, you probably need an outfield spot for him. And Victor is going to be in center field by all accounts, and I believe that should be the case. He had a good game last night. 1 for 2 with a couple of walks, and the one time they retired him was a ground ball to the first baseman, and he almost beat the first baseman to the bag as the batter. That's crazy. I asked Ollie Marmol, have you ever seen a batter almost beat the first baseman to the first base bag in a foot race? And he said, yeah, he's fast. Kind of gave a chuckle there. So Victor Scott, I'm still all in on him, continuing to develop. But you don't have infinite outfield spots. And so if Nootbaar's a guy that, this year was about sort of auditing the roster and everybody sort of had their different things you were looking for from them. For Herrera, you wanted to see, does the bat really play? It does. Can he catch? He can't. So you kind of learn about him in that regard. For a guy like Nolan Gorman, you want to see, with consistent run, does he give you consistent performance? And he was really starting to turn that corner, but I would still say he's in a kind of a TBD position as he sits right now on the injured list. Nootbaar's on the IL as well, but that was his thing. You were looking to determine, could you get a healthy season out of Lars Nootbaar? Could he remain durable? And, whether it's through no fault of his own or whether it's something that you predict because you consider him an injury-prone player, whatever the case, he has not, delivered on what you needed to see from him, I think, to, move forward and offer a contract extension if you wanted to make him a piece long-term for your club. I don't think they've seen what they needed to see to make that determination. Brenden Donovan, different story. I think they erred in not giving him the extension in the first place because I believe I could have told you in the offseason that it was time to extend him, and I did tell you that. But now the price goes up because he has continued to prove what kind of player he is. But hopefully the Cardinals make the right decision there. And they say, look, we need some guys to be the building blocks for the next 5 to 7 years, and you're going to be part of that core. That's the right decision to make. Of course, I see people like John Heyman saying, the Yankees would really like Brenden Donovan. Yeah, no duh. They can't have him unless they're giving up, just multiple top 100 prospects. And even then you go, is it worth it? I hold Brenden Donovan in very high regard. He was great last night. 3 for 5, couple of runs scored, 3 RBIs. He had a 3-run home run in the second inning, and it comes with 2 outs, a clutch walk taken by Victor Scott II. Donovan then gets to the plate as a result. He homers, and then they reload it with Herrera and Burleson getting on base for Contreras, who homers. Willson was 2 for 3 with 4 RBIs. He drove Donnie in the first inning as well. And he's got the OPS up to 797. That's where Donovan's sits. Burley is at 800 on the dot, and Herrera's at 899. That's your 4-pack of hitters that are really giving you a chance. And the rest of the lineup is just not up to snuff at this point. Jordan Walker, though, continuing to move in the right direction. 1 for 3, also reached via walk. OPS is back up over 600. Not a high mark, but you're getting there. Mason Wynn was 0 for 4. He's threatening to go down below 700 for the OPS. But generally, I mean, the top of the order and really what Scott was doing at the bottom carried you yesterday. And it was a good game for the Cardinals offensively. 12 hits, reached base via walk 5 times. So they're really challenging Yu Darvish and challenging that bullpen. They really left some ducks on the pond late in the game. Ivan Herrera homering in the 6th inning gave him a little bit of insurance in the 9-7 win, but had even some later opportunities that they couldn't quite cash in. But that was good to see from the offense, especially the early production. I did the math on this during the road trip. 28-1 was the margin by which the Cardinals were outscored in the first 3 innings of all 6 of those games. 28-1. So every time you started the 4th inning, you're in a big deficit, basically. Wasn't always the first inning, but sometimes it would be a crooked number in the 2nd or the 3rd, sometimes all 3. And so for the Cardinals to, while still giving up runs in the first 3 innings, Sonny Gray was not good last night. Gave up 2 in the 1st, 3 in the 3rd, but the Cardinals had that 7-5 lead after 3 innings because they were able to punch back with a huge 2nd inning. And Gray had the cushion. I mean, he basically said he's got some things to work on personally, but the guys picked him up last night, and that's true. 5 innings, 6 earned runs, 7 total runs, 11 hits, had 5 strikeouts. It gave up a couple of home runs, did Sonny Gray, whose ERA has ballooned to 4.33. It's rough when you're trying to talk about being a playoff team and your entire rotation is blowing up at the same time, other than McGreevy, who wasn't good enough to be in the rotation until just recently, according to the team. So that's what, that's the backdrop of when I talk about, look, I would love to see the Cardinals sweep this series. I cannot really expect them to do that, and I can't necessarily count on this resurgence when the starting pitching looks the way that it looks. It's gonna be tough to figure out a way for the Cardinals to keep plugging away and having the standings favor them. You maybe have to score 9 runs every night. And by the way, I get often kind of turned around when I'm talking through some things on the podcast. What I wanted to get to earlier, and now I'll circle back to it, this idea of if you're trading key bullpen guys, can you get away with just maybe, plugging in Graceffo, Granillo, elevate the role of Riley O'Brien, you call up Fernandez or Roycroft or both, and you go a lefty short. You'd have Steven Matz still out there. John King has not been effective, but he's a lefty that's in the bullpen. You could do that. I still maintain that you could do that. But the point that was being made, as me and a couple others were talking about it after last night's game, is when you think back to 2023, and I've talked a lot about the innings crisis that the Cardinals faced down the stretch of that season, and you ended up waving the white flag, truly. And you had Casey Lawrence, Jacob Barnes, Andrew Suarez, a couple others I'm forgetting. On the offensive side, it was like Caracuto and Irving Lopez. They just had like half a team. And other guys that probably, came off the street and they went right back there after the season. They weren't big league guys. And that's how you end up with 71 and 91. And it was a dark time for that Cardinals clubhouse because they just didn't have any real chance, and they knew it going into every day. The idea being, can you afford, as you look at the progression of the players that are still going to be a big part of your young core going into 2026, can you really afford to sell everybody from that bullpen? Can you sell Helsley, Maton, Romero, and still have enough to get through the rest of the season? Because that can be a demoralizing thing for players that are looking to develop. This was the argument that was being made to me by another one of the media, and it was a really interesting conversation and discussion. When you think about the way that Ollie Marmol and this staff view this season, there's value to be placed on being in an environment where winning still counts, even if you're not winning enough to make the playoffs. Being in those competitive environments and having the tools, having the roster to go out and win those games, win those close games. can be a valuable learning experience for the players that are learning to do it at this level consistently together as a group. And next year it'll be even different. You probably won't have Arenado if he's moved. There's going to be even more young players infused into this conversation. J.J. Weatherholt, is he going to be a part of this? Can you really, and we've talked about, okay, mid-August, call up Weatherholt if he's still looking like a stud at Memphis. But the other side of that coin, and this is a really fascinating conversation. I'll be curious to hear what the audience thinks of this. Can you afford, or is it the right move, to bring Weatherholt into an environment where he's going to come up and the team is going to be getting its butt kicked on a nightly basis if you trade away, your 7th, 8th, and 9th inning guys from that bullpen? Yes, you could bring in these other guys. They're not going to be as effective. I think there's value in seeing, can Ryan Fernandez help you? Because for next year, that would be good to learn. Can Roycroft help you, or do you just need to give up on him? Granillo, can he come in and be a guy? Matt Swanson, can he come up? You're going to give a lot of opportunities to those guys if you trade away, almost half your bullpen before July 31st. But you get into a situation, using last night as an example, where you go up 7-2 and you're cruising, but your starting pitcher gives up 7 runs. And so, after 5 innings, it's 8-7. And then you have Ivan Herrera, so you plug a homer, just a dart to left center, a line shot by Ivan Herrera last night, makes it 9-7. But those last 3 innings, really last 4 innings, O'Brien records 1 out, wasn't perfect. JoJo comes in, and he was fantastic. Inning and 2/3, 4 strikeouts. All zeros. No hits, no walks, no runs. Maton with a scoreless 8th. Helsley with a scoreless 9th. Gave up 1 kind of hit through the middle of the infield, but 2 strikeouts. He looked good. ERA down to 3.09 for Helsley. If you trade away Romero, Maton, Helsley, you do not win that game last night, period. Like, one of those guys, even if it's Graceffo, Granillo, and O'Brien having to pitch a little bit more, or if it's Ryan Fernandez, whoever it might be, Roycroft, you don't win that game last night. And so how many times a week can you, as a roster that's really looking for the future, yeah, technically you're not out of the race now, but more than anything, you're looking to play meaningful games and win some of them so that you can get that meaningful experience, learn how to win as a group. Do you get enough of that if you trade away your whole back end of your bullpen? Or does that put you into a situation where it's going to feel like 2023 and it's going to feel bleak? And it's going to be a hard thing to, get up off the mat and recover from if you're this young core. Maybe we're overstating the degree to which that's going to impact guys long term. But this idea that you're wasting 2 months of a season where they might be completely non-competitive because they're going to get into close games late and they're going to blow them just about every time if they don't have the horses in that bullpen. That's the risk, I think, in selling. I would still do it. Like I said, I had a really interesting, compelling conversation about this. I still came out on the side of, nah, you do it. You do it because while you can value the idea of getting meaningful experience for the young guys and for the roster down the stretch and playing in those types of games and winning them, you can also, I believe, gain value from what you can get from JoJo Romero, from Phil Maton, and from Ryan Helsley via trade. It may not be guys that are going to help you right away in 2026, so I understand that argument that you could be sacrificing and pushing the timeline down even further into the future before the Cardinals can be expected to contend. But I don't think trading a few relievers necessarily is a big time indictment on, whether or not you can contend in 2026. I think there's value to holding it together to continue to scrap and claw, not only for the off chance you might make the playoffs, but for the benefit of the players on the roster and the growth that they could have from, learning how to close out those types of games as a team. There's value there, but I also think there's value in extracting trade value for these players that are not going to be on the team next year. And JoJo will be if he doesn't get traded. But in the case of Maton Helsley, I think you do have to move him. Despite the fact that, it could mean a bleak August, September if the bullpen is the culprit in that. But let me know your thoughts on, this argument that if it gets to be like it was in 2023, nobody's coming to the ballpark and learning anything. Nobody's coming to the ballpark and really experiencing growth from that, because it is a demoralizing thing when going in, like, we don't have the pitching. If we have a lead, we're not going to hold it. And if we don't have a lead, we're just going to have to throw some guy off the street for 4 innings and get our faces beat in again because that's the direction the organization chose. Like, I think there is more nuance than we let on when it comes to these conversations of selling and just, stripping it down to the studs. That can be you have to be careful with that, especially if you're thinking about bringing up Weatherholt in mid-August. Do you bring up Weatherholt into a situation like that? I mean, that's what they did with Mason Wynn, and, he doesn't seem any worse for the wear from it. But it's an interesting conversation. Do you want to bring him up in a spot where he learns right off the bat how to help contribute as a winning player? Or do you bring him into a situation, just get him that experience at the big leagues, even if it's not really like a standard big league season because you've kind of given up? Does trading away those 3 relievers mean you've given up? I think there's a debate to be had on both sides of that. Because, like I said, you're worse for the wear when you're having Fernandez, Granillo, and Graceffo in the spots that were previously occupied by Helsley, Maton, and JoJo. But I'd be curious to see what those guys do. I think there's some merit to that as well. So let me know your thoughts on that in the comments section below, because I do consider that to be an interesting topic of conversation. I want to end here on this. From the Cardinals clubhouse last night, Brendan Donovan had some interesting things to say about the nature of the preparation that goes into each and every game and each and every series, and how yesterday in their team meeting, their hitters meetings before the game, they really kind of made an emphasis to realize they've got to get out to a faster start, because 28-1 over the first 3 innings of every game on the road trip, that was not getting it done. And so I'll play a little bit of this audio for you. I'll jump around a little bit, and then we'll dissect it as we close things out here on B-Schaeff Daily.
I think we had a meeting today where we talked about, let's just, it's baseball, but let's just try to find a way to get going early and see what happens. And I feel like we responded right there and had some big swings and some really good at-bats all down the line.
With the way that road trip went, how important is it to get off to a good start here against San Diego, a team you're trying to chase down?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think the most important day of a series is trying to win the first game of a series, and we're trying to be short-minded, still kind of evaluate and learn from this past road trip, and so today was a good response out of the boys. Us.
What's the challenge in keeping the pressure off if you are playing from behind?
I think it's just kind of just who am I facing? What does he like to do? How does he like to get ahead? What are my strengths? What are my weaknesses? And just like, how can I just like get a good pitch to hit, get a good swing off? If it's not in my zone, pass the baton kind of thing. And I think if you do that, then you take the pressure off yourself. It's like he has to come into my zone, and I know what I'm looking for. And sometimes you are going to get out, sometimes you're going to have big innings, and so I think that's just how we look at it.
To post.
And I think that's what's interesting about the comments there from Brendan Donovan is they were 28-1. That was the early deficit through 3 innings on the road trip. And so the question of like, okay, how do you as an offense not let that bleed into your approach at the plate? Because we talked about sometimes on the road trip, it felt like, are they kind of mailing it in? Do they know the result? Do they know it's not going to be their day? And that can kind of become a pervasive mindset at the plate. I just thought it was interesting to hear Donovan describe as a response to that exact question. Like, what's the challenge in keeping the pressure off if you're playing from behind and not feel like you have to hit a 5-run homer every time you come to the plate or you're screwed? And the way that Donovan just like dove into the minutia of the thought process, like rather than get bogged down in the score, you really have to focus on who am I facing? What does he do? What are his strengths? What are my strengths? What are my weaknesses that he's going to try to exploit? What do I need to do with this pitch that's in this zone? Like just really getting into the minutia of it, I felt like was kind of a telling answer as to really, it's cliche, but you just have to focus on your next moment and try to build something from there. And don't get lost in what the bigger picture is of, yeah, we're down 5-1. I just thought that was kind of interesting. And so whether the score is 7-1 or whether it's 0-0 or whether they have a good day or a bad day, he talked about those hitting meetings being something that is a daily occurrence. And that led into a question where I thought, well, man, if the work is the same every day, it has to be satisfying after a week of really not getting the results, despite putting in the work, that last night you got the results. And how does that kind of impact things potentially moving on into the into the future in the rest of this series. So we'll play a little bit more of that audio from Brendan Donovan before we get out of here.
When you talk about that meeting, that's the typical hitters meeting you start off a series. Is that what you're talking about?
So we have one every day. And I think our staff does a great job preparing us, so it's just kind of up to us to execute it.
Is it just a matter of maybe emphasizing some things a little bit more today? Is that sort of?
No, nothing different. You know, it's just like, hey, let's just this is who we're facing. This is how he attacks, and this is game plan against them.
Is that something that Brownie kind of,
Yeah.
or not dictates, but kind of like just like what you said about kind of going over that plan? Is that kind of what his message was?
Yeah, he runs the meetings. Obviously, like first game of the series, we talk about everything from what they'll do defensively, kind of what they do offensively, because obviously we play both sides. But and then the first day of the series is a little bit longer meeting-wise, just because you're trying to gather so much information.
When the work and the prep is always the same, can it be encouraging then to have one like this after some tough games where you can kind of use this to get rolling into the next few games?
Yeah, you kind of look at it like a 3-course meal, right? The game is your dessert, right? You can't have dessert without the first two. So, and some nights you don't get dessert. So that's how I try to look at it.
I wasn't necessarily expecting an answer that colorful at the end, but I enjoyed that. That was fun from Brendan Donovan last night. They got to have dessert, and they'll be hoping not to skip dessert for the rest of the series, and maybe if they can make that happen, you know, you put the work in the afternoon, you come in for your meetings, and then, you know, the game happens and it goes well, that's your dessert, man. And we'll see if the Cardinals can keep that going. It was a bit of a food desert when it comes to the road trip in the actual desert. Wrote about this for STL Sports Central if you want to check that out from last night. But last night was really good for the lineup, and maybe that's something they can keep going. You know, they got to Yu Darvish. That's a guy that's pitched well against them in the past, but he's kind of been down on his luck and down on his health this year. So that's the name of the game, though. Take advantage of it when a guy that is normally one thing has been something else this year. Don't let him get going against you. And to the Cardinals' credit, they made it happen last night. Still got to figure things out from a pitching perspective. Sonny Gray was not strong last night. Miles Mikolas will go tonight for the Cardinals in Game 2 of that series. 6:15 at Busch Stadium against the Padres as they continue to try to claw back into this thing. And look, maybe their performance can make life difficult on the front office. I still am of the belief that you have to sell. And look, you can sell Helsley and Maton and stop there. You know, would they lose more games the rest of the year? Yeah. Would it be a complete nightmare disaster? No. I think they have enough kind of irons in the fire to figure out who can come up and pitch the 8th, pitch the 9th. You're not going to win as many games, but I think you'll survive it. And I think you can gain real prospect capital for it. Katie Wu talked with Ryan Helsley, and she wrote a recent article where Helsley himself said he thinks it's 90% that he's traded, 10% that he's still here past the deadline. So we'll see whether the calculations there change because of this weekend or not. But he did look good last night. I was glad to be there for the Hells Bells and the red lights and everything, because I don't know how many more times those are going to happen if Helsley is traded. So let me know in the comments your thoughts on everything Cardinals fans, but that'll do it for this edition of the show. Appreciate you guys, as always, for listening, and we'll talk to you next time on b-schaeff Daily. Peace.